Well, it's April, it's a new month, which means it's time for another of our in-depth looks at one of the individual divisions that helps to make up the Gotei 13. And as we're in the 4th month of the year, today we'll be taking a look at the often overlooked and criminally underrated 4th division, although at some point we will have to start doubling these up if I'm going to get them all done by the time the anime comes out, but that's future Tom's problem to deal with. Instead, today, we're going to focus on looking at this division, which is very unique in the fact that it's made up entirely of healers and medics. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe, make sure to do that now for more Bleach videos like this every single week. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well. It really does help and support me and the channel, as it means more Bleach fans like yourselves will then get a chance to see the video and partake in the discussion. And we also have a Patreon for the channel as well. If you want to take that support from me a little step further, if you really like what I do here on the channel, you can go over there, get videos like this one early, and support me for as little as $1 a month. Everyone who's appearing on the screen right now is supporting me over there on Patreon, and a massive shout out goes to every single one of you. I couldn't do this without you, so thank you all so very much. So yes, the 4th division is unique in the sense that it is defined wholly by its special duties, where other divisions kind of have their special duties as something they do as a supplementary activity, something that the division doesn't necessarily focus on, but is just another part of their day-to-day life. The 4th division revolves entirely around its special focus, which is that they are healers, they are medics, and they act as basically the treatment division to help other wounded Shinigami. And this makes a lot of sense. The Gotei 13 is a massive military organization, as we've talked about before, and virtually every single member of the Gotei 13 must put their lives in harm's way to both protect the Seireitei, protect the human world, kill hollows, and just ensure that spirits are able to pass on peacefully. So while they're out there locking blades, killing hollows, and just overall getting wounded, getting injured, and facing death every day, the 4th division kind of sits on the sidelines, waits for them to get injured, and then is there to provide the treatment and support they need. They're made up of doctors, of nurses, of medics, of basically anyone who can help out. And it lends the division a very selfless looking kind of image, a very altruistic nature. They kind of come across as almost like the nightingales of Soul Society, working tirelessly around the clock, away from the front lines, but basically making sure that the Shinigami who are putting their lives in danger end up fit enough to do so again in the future. This role of theirs, which keeps them away from the battlefield, generally speaking, which keeps them away from danger, has led to some unfair assumptions being levelled at the 4th division, particularly by the battle-loving thugs of the 11th division, who basically see anyone who ends up in the medical division as being weak, not really worthy to be, a quote-unquote true Shinigami, a warrior who fights hollows to protect the Seireitei. And so the 4th division ends up being the butt of the joke a lot of the time, being belittled, being mocked, being looked down on, kicked by Shinigami who consider themselves to be stronger than the medics. Really, it seems like from the outside looking in that being a member of the 4th division is a little bit of a thankless job. You seem to work tirelessly, basically, constantly filling the infirmary with injured bodies, especially throughout the story of Bleach, where there are an awful lot of battles taking place over not an enormous amount of time. The 4th division is often on their feet, being worked like crazy, and never really receiving too much praise for the good work that they do. But that's why the 4th division has always interested me, because they are so different from everyone else in the Soul Society. They're not on the front lines, constantly locking blades, constantly getting bloodied and injured. They're instead working on the sidelines, and even in terms of writing and drawing Bleach, the work they do isn't glamorous. It's kind of funny when you think about it. It's almost a little bit meta. When you read Bleach, as a reader, you see the glory of divisions like Division 11, Division 6, Division 10, the 1st Division. You see the glory of what they do really blown up on screen. The 4th Division, on the other hand, are really barely seen throughout this story. The captain of the 4th Division for the majority of Bleach's story is Retsu Unohana, and again, she is barely seen until the Thousand Year Blood War, when the entire division gets a little bit more interesting when it's discovered it's harbouring some dark secrets, shall we say. But unlike the celebrities of the 11th or the 6th Division. The 4th Division flies mostly under the radar a lot of the time, but at the same time, while it is kind of meta in that sense, that the reality of the Gotei 13, its sort of social structure, the way the 4th Division are belittled and looked down upon, is then reflected in the way the story is presented, it does also make a lot of sense. You know, the 4th Division need to be kept out of harm's way because no one else really has the expertise they do, and if they are all wiped out, for example, the Soul Society would be in an awful lot of trouble. Because it's an actual specialism to learn and to master Kaido, which is the healing art of Kido. And so, you know, to know that is to know a valuable skill. But as I mentioned at the same time, if you excel in Kido, in the healing arts, and are placed in the 4th Division, many other Shinigami will look down upon you for not really having true strength, which of course is nonsense. The 4th Division's insignia is the bell flower. And when I was doing research on this, I actually found that the bell flower has a ton of different symbolic meanings. But the ones I picked out as being perhaps most apt, fitting the 4th Division best, were that the bellflower means support, constancy, and gratitude. And again, that really helps to serve this idea that these guys are waiting on the sidelines as that constant supporting figure in the Soul Society. Even if they go underappreciated, even if they aren't always treated with the most respect, they are selfless people, altruistic people who will always be there, working tirelessly through the night to ensure that Shinigami are patched up and sent back out again, and that the Gotei 13, crucially, can continue to function. And doubling down on this idea, their motto is, "Those who grieve are loved." And in my opinion, this motto means a couple of different things. Crucially, it showcases again the compassionate nature of the 4th Division, talking about love, talking about grieving, again this idea of support. They'll always kind of be there to lend a hand, to, you know, basically just prop up, they essentially do prop up the rest of the Gotei 13. They work mostly behind the scenes. But actually, while I think on the surface this motto, again, is just there to showcase that they are very caring, they'll always be there for you, I think it goes a little deeper than that, and I think it's basically supposed to show that they're kind of there, they're not there on the front lines per se, but they witness a lot of harrowing material. You know, if a lot of Shinigami are dying, they're probably going to be dying in the infirmary if their wounds are too great, if they've been brought in off the battlefield, already about to die. For example, when we move on to the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, although this is only really speculation, because we don't actually see it, you can kind of infer that after sustaining fatal, life-threatening injuries, Chojuro Sasakibe was probably moved to the infirmary where he died. And so, despite not being battle-loving, battle-hardened warriors, many of the 4th Division members probably have experienced death firsthand, gruesome injuries firsthand, and so they know better than anyone where somebody is coming from when they are grieving, and so they are there, as we mentioned before, Nightingale-esque, like the angel on Soul Society's shoulder. They are there for you when you are grieving. Those who grieve are loved, and it's like the 4th Division, although that's their motto, that's kind of their saying, they're saying it to everybody else. And I think that's, again, really kind of fascinating, because the 4th Division, you have to assume, know and understand the horrors of war maybe better than anybody else. And then the division's official colour is a sort of light pale pink, which, unlike, say, for example, a hot bright pink, denotes tenderness, love, care, all that sort of thing that, again, you might associate with a division made up of medics. But also the colour is associated with harmony and approachability as well, which, again, you kind of assume is what the 4th Division are all about. Even though they are ruthlessly mocked by people like the 11th Division, they still aim to be approachable by everybody else because, you know, they kind of need to be. If somebody is injured, our doors are always open. And speaking of their doors being open, their barracks are mostly pretty standard, except for the fact they actually house the general relief station of the Soul Society, basically the infirmary. The 4th Division barracks house the infirmary of the Soul Society, and we see this a couple of times, but perhaps most extensively during the first Quincy invasion, at the start of the Thousand-Year Blood War arc, the 4th Division are sealed within their own barracks, and we see basically, rows of beds, and once the doors fling open, we see people being brought in, people like Renji and Rukia being treated, undergoing surgery within the walls of the 4th Division, so that's really neat to see as well. Something else that contributes to the slightly unjust but low opinion of the 4th Division is that their work doesn't just revolve around healing, but kind of just the general well-being and upkeep of the Soul Society in general. They basically perform janitorial work for the Soul Society, ensuring that the Seireitei is kept clean and basically well-maintained at all times. And again, you can completely see why people who exist just to fight, like the 11th Division, would maybe cause trouble for them, bully them essentially as though this were like a school ground. The 4th Division are trying to keep everything nice and tidy, and the 11th Division are around messing things up. You can see where the rift between the two of them comes from, which is extremely fascinating when you consider the position of their captain, Retsu Unohana. There's a lot of nice tidbits of lore surrounding this division, nice world building that Kubo does. The division is split up into different relief teams, and whenever you see the division kind of in action, specifically characters like Yasuchika, Iemura, at the end of the Soul Society arc, at the start of the Thousand-Year Blood War, when big battles have just taken place, they'll often be wearing the normal uniform of the Shinigami, but particularly there are different kinds of additions for the 4th Division. So many of them will often be seen wearing like a green strap. This is the exclusive relief bag that the company has that carries basically all of their equipment. It's really cool that you see their different members wearing that. And then members who are actually involved in the infirmary itself kind of look like the nurses from the human world, but they wear basically unique shihakusho that are a different colour or a different appearance, basically again to denote that they are medical. But I think it's kind of interesting that they do look basically exactly like nurses from the human world. The captain, as we mentioned, of the 4th Division for the majority of our time with the division is Retsu Unohana. And the earliest point we see of the 4th Division is 110 years ago in Turn Back the Pendulum arc, as it is with many of the divisions in the Gotei 13. But the thing about Unohana, as of course we know, is that she is one of the oldest captains in the Gotei 13. It's highly likely that she was captain of the 4th Division way before this point in the story. We know, of course, when the Gotei 13 was founded by Yamamoto, she was the first captain of the 11th Division. And that was about 1,000 years ago or so. And so at some point after that, and yet before 110 years ago, she became the captain of the 4th Division. I think it's highly likely she's been captain of the 4th Division for a very long time. My assumption is at least as long as Kyoraku and Ukitake have even been captains. That would make a lot of sense to me anyway. Her vice-captain at this point in the story is Seinosuke Yamada, a character who is basically never seen or even really mentioned in the canon manga, but plays a decent supporting role in the novel Can't Fear Your Own World. He's the older, slightly sinister and uncouth brother of Hanataro Yamada, another member of the 4th Division. He's actually glimpsed briefly in a single panel in Turn Back the Pendulum, which I think is a cool little detail. And then, for the majority of the present-day storyline, Isane Kotetsu is the vice-captain of the 4th Division. Hanataro Yamada, as we mentioned, is eventually promoted towards the end of the story to the 3rd seat. There are also characters like Yasuchika Iemura in the 3rd seat. And so the 4th Division is a pretty well-rounded one that we see quite a lot of. Izuru Kira is also mentioned as being a former member at some point, which is why he's pretty adept with healing spells. But if we just briefly look at the division's overall role in Bleach. Now, as we mentioned previously, these guys they're not glory seekers. They're never really given any glory, so to speak, as they are often kept back, kept away from the fighting. And Yamamoto in particular seems to have a tendency to keep the 4th Division out of harm's way, which admittedly is quite smart. In Turn Back the Pendulum, we see Unohana basically saying, shouldn't I go to the battle site? Shouldn't I go and see what's going on so I can heal those who might be injured, offer my support? And Yamamoto flatly turns her down, basically saying, I can't risk you. You can't go. And we see this again at the start of the 1,000 Thousand Year Blood War arc, when Yamamoto's final order, on Unohana's words anyway, was to seal the 4th Division inside their barracks so that they can't be targeted by the Quincy, they can't be killed during this first invasion, to keep them hidden away from battle, as Yamamoto presumably assumed it was going to be bad. That's kind of the assumption I get anyway, is that Yamamoto probably took Unohana aside and was like, you have to do this for me. I won't take no for an answer. You have to, again, even, you see Unohana kind of talking back to him in terms about the pendulum in this situation, where things are more dire for the Soul Society, for the Gotei, than they have ever been. You have to imagine that she was like, no, we need to be on the front lines. And Yamamoto was like, this is an order. You will not come out. None of you will come out. You have to be safe so that you can help rebuild. And it's a fascinating moment for me. I love getting the perspective, because we get so much of the frontline perspective in that first invasion, but it's really nice touch as well that Kubo shows us how the 4th Division are thinking, are feeling, because it's just a really dire moment. And Isane, you see that selfless nature, that virtue that makes her a perfect candidate to be in this division coming out. She's crying, she's questioning her captain, she's like, why are we in here? Captain, I can't help but think if we were out there, we would be able to prevent people from dying, less people would be dying. And Unohana, you can sense, is sad about this. And Isane even thinks that. She's like, what am I talking about? More than anything, more than anyone, Unohana wants to be out there helping, but Unohana, remains resolute, determined to carry out Yamamoto's last order, no matter what she senses going on out there. And she says, we have to stay here. That was his final command. And the way she says that as well really makes me think that, she kind of knew he was going to be killed. I think this is after he's dead. And Isane is kind of like, well, why couldn't we have done more? Why couldn't we have helped prevent this? And Unohana's like, that was his final order. I wasn't going to disobey him here. And this is kind of the 4th Division at their absolute peak, in my opinion, really seeing them reacting to a genuine crisis. When you look at the first invasion in general, it's just so much worse for the Soul Society than literally anything that has ever come before, which is why I think, as bleak as this sounds, it was so captivating to watch week in, week out. But the 4th Division are really on their toes here, and you see them all kind of rushing around. But we've jumped ahead a little bit. Their role in the story is basically to be on the sidelines, but they play a nice little investigative role in the Soul Society arc, along with the 10th Division. As, several divisions think that maybe something is not quite right here. There's a cool moment of showdown when Unohana and Isane discover Aizen's treachery, and then are able to broadcast it to the entire Soul Society, but basically they exist to continue to heal people. We see them all really working hard to heal everyone in the aftermath of the Sokyoku battle. And of course, Hanataro plays a pretty big role throughout the entirety of the Soul Society arc, kind of taking on the role that Neliel would take on in the Weiko Mundo arc, which is where a member kind of the enemy forces joins up with the main group and kind of goes along with them. And even Hanataro and Neliel are kind of similar in terms of character as well, both being very young, almost childlike, over-the-top, exaggerative characters. That is kind of the role he plays in that. So moving on to the Irankar arc, then they play an even more diminished role. Again, basically the same thing. They arrive as part of Unohana and Isane, as part of the kind of captain elite squad that goes to Weiko Mundo. They arrive on the battlefield, they kind of force a retreat from Rudborn and the Exequias, which is a pretty badass moment, and then Unohana gets to healing basically everyone she can. Chad, Ganten Bane. Isane is sent to the battleground of Byakuya and Zomari, where she heals Rukia and Hanataro after that fight takes place. Hanataro kind of going along with Byakuya always felt very random to me. Like Kubo wanted him to have a role in this arc, or else it would be weird that he just disappeared completely, but regardless, he's there anyway. And moving into the Lost Agent arc, they barely do anything there as well. We find out that Unohana, Isane, and Hanataro all gave a portion of their Reiatsu to the blade designed to give Ichigo his powers back. And then moving into the Thousand Year Blood War arc, they take a slightly more active role, I would say, than ever before. And that's because this feels like a war more than ever before. And we get a really cool kind of I kind of love the Thousand Year Blood War arc. You guys know that about me. I think it does a lot of things really well. It does a lot of things really weirdly and somewhat badly as well, but I don't think that detracts from the stuff it does really good, and that is showing the Gotei 13 working as a military organization. On the one hand, you have, in the first invasion, you have members of the 2nd Division, the Seireitei, moving, flitting through Soul Society, getting messages to fighting members. Then you have the 12th Division just being a pretty much constant MVP throughout that arc, always working on ways of undermining the enemy and their advances. And then you have the 4th Division, who maybe could have done a little bit more, but I still appreciate it regardless. Once the Quincy transformed Soul Society into a totally different landscape, it's really cool seeing characters like Isane building a makeshift infirmary, a small stronghold for the Shinigami to kind of hold out until they manage to regroup. As we see her with Yachiru as they try and heal the captains Rose and Kensei. Rukia, we know, took Rose and Kensei to Isane, so they're all kind of working together, and that's really nice to see. And then later on, we get the big stronghold of the Shinigami, and Isane, Hanataro, along with Ukitake's help, all kind of come together to really heal everyone in preparation for the big final bout in Varvelt. And then when we get to the Hell Arc, or more precisely the epilogue of the Thousand Year Blood War, moving into the Hell Arc, we find that Isane has been promoted to captain in place of her deceased captain Unohana. Her vice captain is now her sister Kiyone Kotetsu, who moved from the 13th Division, and Hanataro has been promoted to 3rd seat, taking that position alongside Yasuchika Iemura, I believe. I think the novels say something about Iemura having a different role or something like that, but I'm pretty sure as far as the manga is concerned, he's still the 3rd seat, but I could be wrong about that. And speaking of the different characters, let's take a brief look at some of the prominent faces that help to make up the 4th Division, starting, of course, with the 4th Division captain we get to spend the most amount of time with, being Retsu Unohana. Now, you know, Retsu is a character I have talked about in depth on this channel, which admittedly is not something I ever really anticipated prior to making videos here. But we've done a lot of videos about Unohana, even recently as well, so I'm not going to go too deep into this character. But for me, personally, I never found her to be all that compelling until her transformative reveal in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, and I suspect that's the same for many people in the Bleach community. And it's a bit of a shame that she had to shed her 4th Division identity to really become truly interesting. That's just my opinion, of course. But up until that point, I just never found her to be all that compelling a character. She doesn't really ever do that much. It's not really through any fault of her own, but again, it's a symptom of being the 4th Division's captain. She spends a lot of time either on the sidelines or coming up when the fights have already ended. That's not to say there's nothing interesting about her. I love her design, as is the case with virtually every character in Bleach, that kind of matronly, loving mother look, but also quite conservative, something of an elder. You get the impression there's a lot of wisdom there as well. I think that is really good. And then the way Kubo can just take it and transform it into something monstrous for her reveal in the Thousand Year Blood War is just so masterfully handled. And, you know, there is always that sense of intrigue with Unohana as well, which I always found to be quite interesting. That sense that she is hiding something, that sense that there is a lot more to this character who is so ancient, and has kind of seen and experienced much of the annals of Soul Society history, you assume. That there is a lot more to this character than maybe meets the eye, and obviously that turned out to be true. Like I said, it's just a shame that A, she had to kind of discard much of the character she once was, and B, she was then killed off anyway. So that is a bit of a shame, but Unohana was the predominant captain of this division, the face of the 4th Division in many respects, for virtually the entirety of the Bleach storyline. Then there's her vice-captain Isane Kotetsu, who again is the vice-captain for the majority of the storyline until getting that promotion at the end of Bleach. Isane is a weird character, a really weird character, one of these kind of tertiary supporting characters who's given very little to do. You know, I was actually thinking about this not that long ago, just really randomly. The thought came to my head is that there is a hierarchy in the vice-captains, no doubt about it, in terms of who gets shown off the most. And I kind of maybe will talk about this more in a separate video, but just very briefly. Kubo took the time to showcase certain vice captains in each different arc. Obviously in the Soul Society arc, Renji is the main draw as far as vice captains go, but Izuru and Momo also have a pretty decent showing as well. Moving on to the Urankar arc, I would personally say that the vice captains that get the biggest showing here are Hisagi, Rangiku, and Omaida. And then moving on to the 1000-Year Blood War arc, the vice captains that now get the biggest showing are Sasakibe, Nanao, Nemu. And this is, of course, keeping characters like Rukia and Renji at the top of everything because they're main characters. And so, you know, if you were following each of those different sets of names, you will realise that there are certain vice captains who never got a chance to shine. Iba, Isane, to being the two that really come to mind. Yachiru is a bit of a weird one. I would argue that maybe she gets time to shine in the 1000-Year Blood War. But really I'm thinking about characters like Iba and Isane here. Isane is a constant, much like the 4th Division, but she's also barely ever seen. She does a little bit here and there, which basically, you know, acclimatizes the audience to her. Like, I know who Isane is, I know her design, I know the traits that make her unique. She's incredibly tall, for example, being one of them. But this character's given so little to do, which I think is a massive shame, and in many ways it makes it feel like her promotion to the captaincy is unearned, even though I don't doubt her skills. For example, in the Soul Society arc, she is showcased going up against Ichigo only to be annihilated in one hit. This is the only time we ever see her Zanpakuto Ite Gumo. It's the only time she gets taken out in a single hit. And even then, what's really weird about this character is that her healing prowess is very rarely seen. At one point, she is being healed by Unohana. Then we kind of see her healing Hanataro and Rukia after the battle with Zamari. And then after that is very little. There's very little. And that's why this character is just so weird to me, because it felt like Kubo wanted to use her. Like, she shows up every now and then. She shows up a decent amount in the 1000-Year Blood War, for example, again as one of those sort of tertiary supporting characters, but just not ever really doing anything of too much consequence, which I think is a shame. And if there is a Hell arc in the works, it would be awesome now that she's a captain to really see her flourish and showcase exactly what she can do. That being said, there are traits about Isane I've always really liked, and I should save all this for an analysis on her in the future, but for example, I like how she both complements and contradicts Unohana. The two of them are obviously very selfless, again, very altruistic, embodying those core tenets of the 4th Division, but Isane has always come across as much more hot-headed to me than Unohana, which actually I kind of like. I think it's kind of neat. For example, when they are confronting Aizen and Gin, Isane is the one who moves to attack them, showing her inexperience in comparison to her captain. This happens again when they confront Rudborn and the Exequius. Isane is the one who moves to prevent them from escaping, but Unohana says, you know, leave it, we're just here to heal people. And so Isane kind of has that eccentricity to her, that kind of clashes with her captain's often very stoic, very graceful appearance. And I really like that about Isane, and I really hope to see more of her in the future. And then the final kind of major name we're going to talk about is Hanataro Yamada. His brother Seinosuke plays, again, a pretty big role in Can't Be Your Own World, but this is a video about the manga, so we won't really go into that here. Hanataro plays a pretty massive role in the Soul Society arc, acting as an unwilling agent to begin with to help Ichigo and the others, but eventually kind of really just helping them out of his own kind of volition. And that showcases a bravery in Hanataro that you wouldn't... Hanataro is kind of designed to be the atypical 4th Division member. Kind of meek, kind of cowardly, a little bit pathetic, but very good at what he does. And they come into, again, odds with the 11th Division here, but Hanataro really does showcase his bravery. And like I said, I think I mentioned earlier, it feels like he's very much the same character as Nell in a lot of ways, and it felt to me like Kubo really wanted to keep Hanataro relevant in some way, but just couldn't think of a way to do it. You know, Hanataro shows up very randomly in the Urankar arc, and he keeps showing up as well. He's one of the Shinigami noted to have given Ichigo his powers back in the Lost Agent arc, and then in the 1000-Year Blood War, Hanataro is part of the squad who is healing people at the end of the first invasion, and then ends up going to Varvelt randomly. Again, I've got no problem with it, because Hanataro, while not necessarily a fan favourite character, there is that element of nostalgia surrounding him. But it's, you know, it's interesting nonetheless to see him going up to the royal palace. I mean, even Isane didn't get up there, and Hanataro Yamada is up there, doing virtually nothing, and then apparently off-screen being incapacitated accidentally by Mayuri. So, you know, Hanataro's another one of these characters mostly just used for comic relief, but at the same time does kind of get across the core principles of what it means to be a member of the 4th Division. Other members of the division include Aoga, who was one of the student body leaders alongside Hisagi when they went out on their ill-fated mission, and alongside Academy students Renji, Momo, and Kira. I thought Aoga was dead, but then he actually shows up in one of the supplementary chapters, and he's apparently all right. And I think, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, I think their student friend who does die is called something like Kanawa. That might be completely wrong, but the time you see Aoga, they are honouring her at her grave. It's also revealed that Izuru was a former member of the 4th Division as well, which is really cool. And the only other real kind of recognisable face from this division is Yasuchika Iemura, who is the third, I think, the current co-3rd seat. Iemura is kind of a weird character. He's one of these guys who basically has very little to do in the manga itself, but is seen like a decent amount in terms of the anime-specific omake, all that sort of thing. The weird kind of little jokey things on the side is where he shows up more often than that. He's always kind of given off a bit of a sinister vibe to me, like he has grand ambitions, I think, that will never be realised, but he's also, yeah, just maybe a bit sleazy. Another member of the 4th Division who is basically only seen like once, called Ogido, kind of implies this as well, so that's interesting to note. But again, Iemura's pretty good at what he does, and he's mostly just there to help people who are in need, as is much of the 4th Division in general. And so, I mean, that's basically it for the 4th Division as a whole. Like I said, they're a very unique division. We'll not see anything like it again as we move through the rest of the divisions in the Gotei 13. Particularly a division that's just not focused on fighting or combat at all, but instead is out to heal other members of the Gotei. There are obviously divisions coming up who have their own special duties, you know, obvious one being the 12th Division, but really the 4th one is definitely the most unique feeling to me, and I think that resonates truly throughout the division as a whole. But that's it for this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to know what your favourite member or moment of the 4th Division is. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done already, give the video a thumbs up, and until next time, I'll catch you later. I'll see you then.